Okay, next we have up Leon Flournoy from the San Antonio District. And he's going to talk kind of from the owner perspective with some thoughts on construction. And I actually pulled yours up. I didn't pull that up for Randy, so I left him hanging.
Take that. Okay. So, yeah, I noticed I'm not real good about getting close enough to the mic, so if you can't hear me, let me know. I'll get closer. I'll try this, David. So my name's Leon Flournoy. I'm the district bridge engineer in San Antonio, and we're busy down there. It kept me a little bit long to get up here this afternoon, but I'm here. I've heard the presentations before, a few of them. So when David asked me to give a presentation on construction, I was thinking, I don't know that there's 15 minutes or 30 minutes of construction topics in the field, that is. So I'm going to do my best, and I thought what would be maybe more useful is exactly why San Antonio considered these in the beginning. So where am I pointing this, David? Oh, down. There we go. This is a mandatory slide. I hope you all know what this is. It's the department's goal to preventing or having at least one day without a fatality on our roads. So again, these are the three girders. This particular project that I'm discussing is 1604 and I-10 on the northwest, or pretty much the north central side of San Antonio. And like I mentioned, you kind of heard the difficult presentations already, or the difficult part of these caps. The installation was actually, I don't think, I'm not going to, quote for Williams Brothers, but I didn't think it was that complicated. And again, to discuss the nuances of erecting and bolting these things with 4 bolts, or whatever it was, I'm not going to discuss. I'll kind of stick to, again, our idea of why we chose these in lieu of more traditional means. And, I know where I'm at, but this wasn't the only prefabricated element that we used on the project. We viewed it as a tool, or one of many tools that we used. So again, this interchange is actually the first, it was the first, recently realized this, the first interchange that was designed and constructed in its entirety in the district. Typically, from what I've noticed, we build out maybe 2 DCs at a time, and then finish out in a future project the rest. So why we chose to do all the DCs at once in one design and one construction project, I don't know the exact background behind. I think it was because we had the money. That's probably the bigger driver. So obviously, if you're doing all these DCs, it's very congested. And I think Nico had a great slide that probably showed the entire interchange, and you saw a lot of lines, right? A lot of ramps, a lot of existing ramps that we had to keep open. And so when we were designing this, we had LJ do a really deep dive into where possible erection cranes might be placed, where shoring towers might be placed. Williams Brothers might disagree that it was a great job, but I think it was a pretty thorough job. And we didn't know exactly who was going to get it and how it was going to be erected. So in that deep dive, it became very apparent that the main lanes were going to be affected, at least for a substantial period of time. And so having the frontage roads open as a primary way of means getting through the interchange became more and more apparent. So I think here I have some of the considerations, right, for designers and the department. Vertical clearance, right, is kind of an obvious one. Multiple vents placed in one height, that's another benefit. Prolonged traffic disruptions. crane size and duration of being in the work zone. And lastly, comparable spans to PT caps. And then I'm going to kind of discuss some of the nuances that we're taking into account. So let me see. On the con side, right, the things that the department considered, really, I'm not sure how much it was discussed, but these can roughly be 2 to 3 times, if not more, the cost of traditional means. So that's something that really needs to be taken into account. And then for us, I mean, obviously you see we went with a weathering steel protective coating or lack of an applied coating, but in other places you may have that as a maintenance cost in the future. That shouldn't be an issue for us. So again, the vertical clearance, a lot of these, it's not the best photo I had, but generally a conventional way of forming is having support beams. And you'll notice that, you're taking some of the depth up with those support beams. So that was one issue, especially when we're talking about a straddle cap, right? We're trying to keep traffic moving beneath, and that's sometimes prohibitive. Something I just want to bring up, working over traffic itself presents its own issues. Obviously, the risk of objects falling to the traffic below, falling tools, form work, hard hats. And, again, I mentioned the congested work zone. I think this is something that doesn't often get looked at enough, but, you have shore towers. They're used commonly. You see them. Form work that's, up in the air. And a lot of times there's support lines. And there's not a lot that the designer can do to tell you where those supports, those guy wires are going to be placed. And in a very congested work zone, that is an obstacle for the contractor to actually maintain. Obviously, I think the most obvious selling point is the amount or the quickness in which you can erect these. These particular 2 vents that you see here were done in one night. And, I'll discuss a little bit later maybe what it would take for more conventional means, but, you could really, the contractor's limited really by the equipment that they have. If they had more cranes, they could, and had more caps to erect, they could probably have done that in a single night. I keep mentioning if we went with conventional means, I think in Texas at least, our conventional means is cast in place concrete. So you see here, if you count up all the closures, we're here setting forms, we're here placing steel cages. In the case of having a long span straddle, you're dealing with PT caps. So again, you have more time for installations. Go. And also when you're thinking about cast in place concrete, you're thinking of, the time of placement. And if you're looking at really long spans, you're noticing that that placement might be upwards of 12, 15 hours. It's more than a nightly closure. You're affecting the next day, well into the next day. So that's also something to keep in mind. And then when you're thinking of strength gain, the rate of strength gain, that's also something to take in mind if you're going to be when you're going to be dropping forms. And again, if it's a PT element, you're looking at stressing. And I think the spec is updated to not or disallow stressing during or while having traffic below. Other options that we considered and we utilized in some areas were precast caps for straddles. The San Antonio district, I think, is probably one of the first to use this in a very small application, I guess. But what we found was there's a weight span length obstacle, I guess, if you want to say. So we found, and here you notice, you see the 16 foot 2 inch vertical clearance, but we're really only reaching that 45 to 50 foot range And then after that, it kind of taps, you kind of max out on the weight for practical lifting limits. Let's see. What else? Something that came up on this particular project was, the size of cranes needed to lift some of the heavier members. A lot of, this isn't this particular project, this was an old stock photo I had, one of the larger cranes that I've seen installed, and it takes multiple days to actually assemble the cranes themselves. And you think it's not that big of a deal. You could lift it off, you could kind of mobilize the crane off site or, outside the travel lanes, but that's really difficult in a tight work zone. So that's another thing that's sometimes not really understood or even paid attention to, the amount of time it takes and the footprint some of these larger cranes with their counterweights take. So while, contractors can generally find cranes to lift certain loads, you have to think about the footprint that they're going to take. And lastly, I just wanted to kind of throw this out there. I mean, most of the projects that we've had that have recently, I guess, that have led have been big bridge projects. So we've been asking designers to take a look at these accelerated methods and do kind of a cost comparison. And you'll kind of see the distinct cost differences there, right? Like I mentioned, 2 to 3 times the cost of conventional cast in place means. Something that I thought should also be paid attention to is really the duration of that bridge. How long does it really take to, that seems to be something that people focus on. How long does it take to construct that bridge, and is there really any benefit? One of the things that you probably should think about is, it's not so much the length of the entire bridge, but how long and what's that duration that you're affecting the public, right? In our case, we've had main lane closures. We've allowed main lane closures all weekend. So we've had to put traffic on the frontage roads for extended periods of time. And so those bent caps that can be erected in one night are critical, at least in the San Antonio district. And I imagine, other places in Texas, we're growing, obviously, and there's areas that, that might dictate the use of these and having limited impact on the traffic. So with that, I'll stop. Come over. Does anyone have any questions? Use? Go ahead.
This is your previous slide. Is that steel box the traditional cap box or the I-Girder?
When this estimate, this particular project was done, I think it would be pre the new I-Girder system. So yeah, I didn't have that cost at that time. Pound? You were thinking that linear foot? That would be a great deal, wouldn't it? I mean, that's the cost, right, that we're paying once erected.
How much
Right. I mean, right, there's a lot more to it. You just saw a lot of slides.
Yeah.
Yes, Michelle.
Did y'all consider the savings in traffic control costs?
That's a really good question, Michelle. I think, and I didn't want to even delve into that here, right? There's user costs that are tremendous. There's, the businesses that are affected, they could even throw on top of the public's user cost, right? How much they're not making that weekend. And I think that could be a rabbit hole. But on the user cost, that's probably something that could be done. I just didn't delve into that deeply.
The savings would be pretty significant as well, especially on something like others.
Yeah, certainly.
Can
Yes.
you help me? I'm probably a little slow here, but see, a heavier weight, a higher unit cost per weight is a lower cost. Am I reading that table wrong?
That's probably
Oh,
Yeah,
cubic
it's
yard.
different units.
Okay. So the unit cost per cubic yard.
Sorry.
Thank you.